Hey, welcome, community. This is I Fight With What You Fear with your host, Richard Vega. That's me. And I'm so excited today about our speaker today, or what you would say our interviewee, Crystal, a good friend of mine. She is a wonderful woman of God. She is a wife, a mother, a business owner. She's a leader. She's a thought thinker. She is taking territory. And we're going to get more into that on how she's taking territory for the kingdom of heaven, what I feel. But most of all, she is my daughter of the King, and she's my friend. And so she is here today to talk about her beliefs and going forward and what it looks like in the kingdom world as a strong, independent woman in a business world, and as well as a Latina, and representing our people on different fronts. So I wanted to come on here real quick. She's a business owner of called Ari. Is that correct?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So the Ari source, right? Part of what I do as a business coach and an executive coach and a leadership trainer and developer is you hear a lot of what's going on nowadays is the universe, and everybody has everything inside of them. And it's true, but to a certain extent, right? So when I started developing my company, a lot of the things that people would say is, well, if you connect to the source, what's the source? And they would say it's the ether or the universe, or, right? Well, my source is my creator. And my creator is the creator of the universe, not the universe. So I say that oftentimes. And when I was deciding what name it should be, I fell back on the word Ari. And Ari in Hebrew is lion. And so the lion is depicted in the Bible as Jesus, right? He's the lion and the lamb. Mm. And so when I say the Ari source, oftentimes people want to know what is Ari. They think it's my daughter Ariana, but it's not. It's the lion source. But to me, that means that my source is Jesus, because I believe Jesus created the universe. He's not the universe, right? So that power and authority supersedes all the other theories that are out there. When we tap into the lion source, we tap into how and who we were created to be. And once we're tapped into the source, then we hit those potentials. Then we operate in who we were created to be and in purpose. Because what we see nowadays is people that are lost and trying to find identity, trying to find purpose, waking up thinking, why was I born? Yeah. Was I born for a purpose? And we're all seeking that calling, right? And oftentimes people think they were born out of mistake. They believe their parents just hooked up and, oh, I'm a product of the hookup. Right. However, I believe firmly that your parents hooked up because God had a plan for your soul to be born at that specific date and time. Maybe the circumstances weren't right? By Christian means or whatever. Right. However, that soul that has purpose, and they were called to do that. So it all kind of wraps into what is your source and how do we tap into it? Because when we tap into the Ari, the lion, to our creator, then we have unlimited potential.
I love that.
And not the type of potential that Tony Robbins talks about, because this is connecting to the creator of the universe.
Right. It's easier if you tap into the creator, because he knows exactly what he designed you to do, right?
That's good.
He, I always tell people, there's two wills, right? There's your will, and then there's his will. And if you just do his will, what he created you to do, it's going to be so much easier.
Absolutely.
And you'll be able to flow a lot better. Doors will open. You'll be able to be more gifted and craft your gifting better. The Bible speaks about, your gifting will make room for you. Mm-hmm. And so if we're able to tap into that, and I love what you said, because for a long time, identity is a major issue right now. Right? We see it across America. And I had an interesting conversation this morning with an individual, and he was just asking me about this transgender movement and crime and things like that, and I told him they're all tied together, and he didn't understand how I could correlate all this together. Mm-hmm. I said, well, it's an identity crisis, and exactly. If we go after children and we have them believe in a different identity, well, it causes confusion.
That's exactly right.
They lose focus of their purpose. They lose focus why am I here? They never asked the Creator, what is it that while I'm here? If we go off the Bible says He knew us before the foundations of the world, right? And that He knitted us in our mother's.
That's right.
And so He thought about us before the formity of the universe.
He already had us in mind. He was thinking of us. He was loving us. He was imagining us already before He even decided, oh, let me create this earth.
And He created you and I to be here for this time and age.
That's right.
To make an impact in our communities. For you and I, I think our generations come from I wouldn't say the old world, but in a way an old world to the new world. And what I mean by that is we're both Latinos, and a lot of our people have been told to vote a certain way, Democrat, right? Or to believe in that ideology or that system, but yet we had conservative values. Now I know for my family, I was always raised with conservative values. My grandparents were like, this is what you're doing. Now, they never told us you're Republican or you're Democrat.
Exactly.
We had these values, and you're either you're gonna abide by it. If not, you're gonna get the chancla, or you're gonna get hit with a broom.
One of them.
You're gonna get hit with something.
Yes.
But you come now today where predominantly in a Hispanic community is predominantly Democrat, which was always rather confusing for me because so many Hispanics or Latinos are raised with such conservative values. I mean, going to Catholic churches, and I didn't understand how you could be Catholic and yet be pro-choice. I didn't understand a lot of these things before I was ever into the church.
It's a sales pitch. It's a sales pitch. It's a sales pitch. And I say it's a sales pitch because you're right. There's an identity crisis worldwide. And I need to be careful how I say this because it could even upset some Christians. The identity that we seek starts from the moment we're in our mother's womb. That baby feels the spirit. That baby has a spirit. The mom has a spirit. And when I was facilitating with Family Foundations, we did a lot of inner healing ministry. In that process, we learned oftentimes what happens is this baby inside of a mom hears and feels everything the mom feels. Sometimes the fear. And oftentimes the mom really wants that boy, and that baby senses that, or really wants a girl. And many years ago, there was no way to know what the gender was. You didn't know until the baby was born. And that moment of conception brings a blessing or a curse. And some people think curse is like witchcraft, but it's not. In Hebrew, the word curse simply means to disempower to prosper. To bless, baru, means to empower to prosper. So there's 7 times of a person's life where God, the Creator, intended for that blessing to come to that child by form of tradition, by form of blessing. And what happened is, so the conception, it was God's will and His idea from day one that you were conceived within a marriage of a loving mother and a father where that baby is wanted, where that spirit, that baby is desired. And so we see that the Bible doesn't say, don't have babies out of wedlock to control you because God is an ugly God. Rather, He's a God that wants to protect you with boundaries because He knows that when you're outside of those boundaries, then you set yourself up for the attack of the enemy. But when you're protected within that realm, His protection is there. So, and this is, I myself had both of my children out of wedlock, knowing this. Well, the second, knowing these principles. They're principles, right? They're not laws. You can choose whatever you want to do in life. Oftentimes we choose the things that we're unaware of. That's why Jesus says, they don't know, forgive them, right? My people perish for lack of knowledge. Society today has been ripped away from protection, from God's desire to protect you. So the moment of conception is a moment of, it should be a beautiful thing. It should be mommy and daddy love each other, came together under the covering of God in a holy matrimony. That baby's already protected, right? Then the baby's born. Then we have a baby who immediately senses whether the mom wants it or not. It's a girl. I wanted a boy. Or even the father around the world who really wants that first son, and the baby's born a girl. What happens in that moment of that baby's spirit? That energy transfer that people talk about nowadays, that's your spirit. God created you a 3-part being. We're not going around calling ourselves there and they, right?
Right.
I'm me, but in 3 parts, just like Jesus Christ. So once that baby comes into the world, you've got 2 moments where blessing and protection should have been there to protect that baby's identity, that baby's purpose. And when we look at those 2, we can see why people say, I was born this way. Some people say, I believe it. Some people say, I don't believe it. I'm not a scientist. However, I don't always rely on science because science is something that cannot be measured in a lab. You can't measure faith. You can't measure feeling. You can't measure the things that make us human.
Right.
Those things cannot be measured.
Right.
Okay? So when we talk about the identity crisis that our world is facing right now, it's super complicated, but it's super easy too. Because what happens when mom and dad are not there to protect the identity of that baby? And mom is working and dad is working. And the baby is set to go to daycare. Now you're part of being raised by a system. You go to preschool, you go to school, then you go to middle and high school because mom and dad have to make ends meet. So this baby seeks their identity where? In their environment. And what's happened is, because as humans, we've decided, it goes back to the first book of the Bible. Humans always want to take control and not be told what to do. So we've lost connection with the truth that a loving God set boundaries for protection, not rejection. But we see this huge disconnect in our world about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, where humans decided, I don't want anything to do with religion. I don't need a God to tell me who I am or what I do. I'm a free spirit. I'm going to figure this out on my own. God created you with free will. You can absolutely do that.
Yep.
But you can't choose the consequences of that. So now what we see is young men walking around this earth who say, I'm depressed, I have no identity, and I have no purpose. I think that sounds good. It's the age-old classic. I want to feel part of a group. I want to feel loved and accepted. And hey, these people accept me, so I want to be like them. Instead of, I'm loved and told at home that I was created by God to be a man and fulfill my purpose as a man. And look at me, I'm a woman talking about that, right?
Right.
But I so firmly believe it because nowadays we are seeing culture and society tell you, oh, it's okay to not be a man. Be sensitive. Absolutely be sensitive. Jesus was completely sensitive, but he was also a full manly man. Fished, right? Built things with his hands. He was a man. And I think that society is taking away the beauty of a man. Like, my husband is a man's man, and I think that that is so sexy. Forgive the term, but it is. I think women are drawn to men. Why? Because they're confident, they're secure in their manhood, and they create what we say makes us feel safe. Now you have a movement of women saying, I don't need a man. I don't need a man. Well, most of those women weren't raised by a strong father figure. So they were trained, I don't need a man. You're not going to tell me what to do.
There's a big thing, years ago, the independent woman, right? With, I think it was Beyonce or whoever it was, and there's nothing wrong with an independent woman. I was raised by a single mother.
Yeah.
But you hit it on the head on there, I grabbed a hold of an identity that wasn't mine, right? So my mother and father weren't married, and then my father never wanted to be in my life. and my mom worked all the time. But then when I discovered what a bastard was, I took on that identity.
Oh,
And so
many people.
people would tell me, like, when someone would say, "Oh, you're a bastard," it did something to me, and it created a reaction that most people didn't want, and that I didn't want. But I mean, I would engage in a physical confrontation at that time in my life, because it was a factual hurt that I held on to that identity, when really, truthfully, it doesn't matter what the world says, because my Creator doesn't see me that way.
That's right. But it doesn't change the feeling. But it doesn't change the feeling inside.
Not at all. The emotions, the aspect of the emotions, I say, your thoughts can't be trusted when emotions are high. So whenever your emotions get involved and you think, okay, I'm going to go do this, you act stupid. And so, but a lot of these, right now, we've seen this identity crisis that has really taken on, and it leads to anxiety, depression, suicide, because of they don't know most people don't know who they are.
And let me talk about that. So in a study that we did a long time ago, a Bible study, it taught where when children were born under Hebrew law and culture, there was a set of traditions and religious ceremonies that were set in place as protection, right? So the moment that baby was born, it was blessed. Actually, from the moment of conception, it was covered. It was under a covering of protection, so it's blessed. It's born into a place, an environment that is loved, it's wanted, it's appreciated. The baby is nurtured by a mom. It doesn't feel like it's ripped away, or it doesn't feel it's not wanted. That's another moment of security and safety. And then as a child, it grows up, then it faces another moment in time where it's loved and accepted and nurtured and cultivated to grow into its identity. If it's a man, it's affirmed. You're a man of God. It's given a manly name, but the name was given with a purpose attached to it. Every biblical name spoke identity, spoke purpose. So you can look at the Bible and you can look at historical stories, and you don't really see 13, 14-year-olds going around saying, geez, I wonder what on earth I was born for. And that's the question. That's the question that subconsciously almost every human is seeking an answer to. They're seeking, like, who am I? Why was I born? I'm not getting that answer from family. I'm not getting it from girls. I'm not getting it here. So we start to, it's like a metal detector. We start going to the place where we feel we're going to get that answer. But it doesn't answer it because that person doesn't have that key to unlock the keyhole here that says, ding, here's your identity. They don't have it. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. So they keep going around life seeking for validation, affirmation, all of these things that will impart who they are. They're looking, tell me who I am. Tell me what I was born for. Tell me who I'm supposed to be. And really, the men of the Bible knew that. And so they spoke it into their name. You were designed, you were born, you were loved, you were planned for, you had a purpose. And their name had attached to it the purpose and the identity. So you didn't go around wondering, like, you had 13-year-olds, King Josiah, running kingdoms at 13, like full-on men. They weren't sitting there wondering, I think I want to wear a dress. No. They were like, let's reign. Let's be a kingdom.
No.
Right?
You're a man.
You are a man. You were designed to be a man. And the same thing goes for little girls. Mm-hmm. Every little girl, by the time she's 2 or 3, there is some instinct that's created, embedded in us, that at that age, we want to put on little heels and a dress. You can study it worldwide, culture by culture, ethnicity by ethnicity. Every little girl looks for that moment to put on a dress and look for the father figure in her life and spin in front of him looking for that affirmation. You are a beautiful daughter. Hold her, make her feel safe and protected. There's nothing wrong with that. The independent movement pretty much is rooted in, I don't need a man because I never had a man. I never felt safe with the men in my life. And so that thing of, I don't need you, I can do it on my own. Yes, we can do it on our own. I say it all the time. I told my husband when I met him, I was like, I don't need you to save me. I have a savior. I have a savior. I know who I am in Christ. I need a partner. I need someone to help me to feel protected and safe. And there are women out there out of survival mode that will say, I don't need that. However, Every woman that is next to a man's man feels safe, feels protected, because that's how we were created. Maybe not 100%. Are those few out there, right? But it's in our nature. It's our instinct to be the nurturers, to be the woman. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the woman that wants to marry a husband and be a stay-at-home wife. Beautiful. I think God designed it that way. Now, I'm a working woman. I'm a businesswoman because I love that. But I also find that that's my calling to the world. That's my corporate calling, right? Is to do those things. But our society has taken us away from the fact of it's okay for a woman to be attracted to a man and him be fully manly confident, healthy confidence, not ego, healthy confidence, and the woman to be confident in her womanhood.
Right.
And to be everything that God created us to be as women, and everything the man was created to be as men. That doesn't mean that a man doesn't do the dishes. My husband comes home and helps me with the dishes. He's sent from God, trust me. Because I know what it's like to not have that.
There's a merger, right? You know, and I love the men and women, you know, the women is a helpmate, right? But that doesn't mean like a lot of people interpret it so many different ways. You know, she's an extension to the spine from the rib. And I love it because she's a side-by-side partner.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people take the scriptures and be like, well, she's supposed to be submissive, right? And they take that as she's supposed to be my slave. It's like, man, how do you rewiring people's thought patterns, and just that alone has been a journey. Because when you, like my wife, I prayed her in, right? I wanted an educated woman. You know, I wanted a woman that was a woman that knew she was confident in womanhood and that she was a loving mother. I wanted her to be able to speak Spanish. Like that was something I really wanted. And that she knew how to love me for me. Mm-hmm. She understood me for me. And so when that came together, you know, obviously learning your strength and weaknesses together, like you said, doing the dishes, or it takes us both to run the household.
Absolutely. It's a partnership.
And she has her master's degree in education. She had her career. She had her own house. Like, she could throw me to the wolves and be like, you know, I'm an independent woman. I got my own job, my own career. I got my own retirement.
I don't need you, but I want you. And that's the beautiful thing about it, right?
It's beautiful. I love it.
But I also realized that, and it took me some time. It took me some time to come to the terms of, I don't need you to tell me what to do. However, I was very fortunate to be raised by a very strong male figure. So for me, this is where I struggled in corporate America with the men. Sometimes they would come in and try to take authority, where my spirit rejected it. My spirit didn't like it because, not that I was being insubordinate, it was I didn't feel like you had the proper authority to lead and guide me. And I think that when I'm a strong personality. A lot of people know that, right?
I'm Latina, so I mean, it's just in your DNA.
It's a little bit of the DNA for sure. But that tough womanhood, it comes from confidence. I'm so confident in the woman I am today. Maybe not when I was 18, 19, 20, 21. The woman that I've evolved to be is a woman that knows exactly who she is, who she was created to be, and is so secure in herself, in her godliness, and in her womanhood. That has been a journey, a lifelong journey. I believe that when we hear the word submissive, a lot of women reject that, and then they turn to reject the whole Bible because they say, I don't want a religion. When it's not religion, it's relationship. And to tell me what to do, or men that wrote the Bible. Okay, so little perspective on that. I don't mind a confident man who has healthy confidence, who knows his identity in Christ, and who doesn't make me feel unsafe or feared by controlling me out of his insecurities. But when you have a man that's fully secure in himself because he is led and he responds to a higher authority, then it's easy for the woman who has a strong person to come alongside that strong man and let him lead and guide.
Absolutely.
However, the moment a woman like me senses that there's an insecurity there, I don't even have to logically think it. I automatically respond to that. I'm like, oh, I feel insecurity. Then I'll take the lead. And that's where a lot of disbalance, I believe, happens in many relationships, because we don't have enough people who are secure in themselves confidently in who they were created to be, so that you can come together the way God designed it eons ago when he had the Bible inspired to be written. The way it was designed to be was that we could trust our husbands, that they wouldn't take that authority level and misuse it. So now you have a culture of women who say, I don't need a man, but yet they post thirsty pictures online and then trying to get all the attention, but I don't need you. Oh, but I need a sugar daddy to take me out because I want to be wined and dined. I want to feel like a princess. But that's not the right way to do it. It's if when we're secure in our identity and who we are, what we were created to be, when we had parents that knew what their calling was to impart that blessing, that identity, and that purpose in our lives, then we don't spend our entire life searching for someone to tell us, oh, I think you have all the power. You can choose what you want to be. Absolutely. But there is a knowing and a confidence that comes when your mom and father look you in the eye and say, son, you were designed to conquer and to be a king.
Yeah. I love it.
To be a man of God. You were designed to lead. You were designed to love God, to become a man in the community that is fully confident in his manhood, and a woman fully confident in her womanhood. It's a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. And they complement each other well, right?
They complement each other well. So to finish the whole 7 times of identity, I learned this by Pastor Craig Hill, who he founded Family Foundations International. He talks about the ceremony that Jewish people do, right? The bar mitzvah, the bar baka, which is a key time in a child's life where that identity magnet, if you will, is on extra high. And so at that time of puberty is one of those points of the 7th time where you are designed to receive that blessing of your affirmation of your manhood or your womanhood. So you are looking at your parents with the community to have a rite of passage into your manhood. At the age of 13, you are now a man or a woman. You're no longer a child. What do you do with that? You impart blessing and you set them on a trajectory to succeed in life. But another thing that I learned that they do, and I know a lot of Jewish families today don't do it as often as they should, but the Orthodox Jews still do it. And every Friday night they have a Shabbat dinner, right? And in that dinner, from my understanding, is the man, the father, first looks his wife in the eye and reconciles in front of the family and says, forgive me for hurting you this week. If there's anywhere, that I failed you as a husband, in front of the family, they do this at the dinner table. And the wife and the husband reconcile there. And then he blesses his wife. He speaks blessing over her. And then both of them, the father goes and then speaks blessing of identity into each of those children at the dinner table. That doesn't happen once a year, once in a lifetime. That happens 52 times a year. Now imagine being a young man or a young woman who has a father figure look you in the eye and say, I'm proud of you, I love you. You were designed to conquer, you were designed to be a woman or a man. I affirm your identity and I love you. And then they speak blessing over you. And then they teach you how to run a business and be successful.
And we know how successful the Jewish people are.
And I say this a lot when I teach. So to speak to that, and these are numbers from 1999, I remember. Back then, in the seminars that we're talking about, I learned this very powerful concept. And it was, why are the Jews so successful? They don't even realize it. But I always ask people, who are the most successful people in the world when I do business training? I don't know, Bill Gates or whoever, and they list off names. And I say, okay, imagine this. Imagine that less than 2%, the numbers are now a little less because of global population growing, right? Less than 2% of the global population owning half of the world's wealth. That's the numbers.
Wow.
In 1999, it was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was right at 2.7%, something around there, of the Jewish population worldwide. It's now smaller, even though they're growing. They're not facing genocide anymore, but their population is growing. But still, the global population, the law of multiplication is still growing. So their number has decreased. And today, they still own more than half of the world's wealth. So you take all the money in the world, you cut it in half, and you say, okay, I'm going to give it to the 3 million people in the world. What are they doing and we're not doing?
They're blessing their children and wives. They are a close-knit community. They do business with each other. They don't, if they have a disagreement within amongst each other, they put it to the side so each other can thrive.
They do.
For the next generation.
They absolutely do. And they work hard. They work from sun up to sundown, 6 days a week, and they absolutely rest.
How many days a week?
They work 6 days a week.
6 days a week. But yet so many people in America will work 5 days.
And complain.
I get 2 days off. And then they wonder why they can't get ahead and open a business.
And I tell business owners this all the time. So the number one question I get is, I need work-life balance. So social media has set people up for failure because they say self-care, self-this, self-that, take your time. Absolutely, take your time. But if you go to sleep on time and wake up on time, you have the energy to run your business 6 days a week. If you just do those things, set goals, set time, work all day. I literally work. I work so much. Sometimes I am facing burnout. And I need that one day to just recharge. It's biblical. It's biblical. I had one guy that I was working with. He was like, I feel guilty because on Sundays, I want to go to church. He's a Christian guy, young professional. He's like, I just feel guilty. No, Saturdays, I'm sorry. He goes, I literally wake up and cannot get out of bed. He's like, I'm in bed all day. I said, what time do you wake up during the week? He goes, I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I go, what time do you get to work? He said, 6 a.m. What time do you get home? 7 p.m. And then he goes to Bible study. And then he's doing all these philanthropic things. And I'm like, and you think you shouldn't rest a day? Society's lied to you, one. And two, society's also lied to business owners that being rich happens overnight and that they can do it working part-time because Instagram influencers will post their pictures in Italy and say, become a millionaire doing what I do. That's a lie. Less than 1% of Instagrammers make that kind of money and give themselves the freedom to live like that. Like, building a business is going to cost you. I do a seminar called, it's on that topic. It's going to cost you something. Your dream is going to cost you. And we can't be afraid to do the work.
Absolutely not.
Cannot be afraid to do the work.
I have there's a couple of things that I live by, when I mentor people, I tell them, you're going to have to sacrifice things, on this level, not that my level is any better than anybody else's, but you're going to have to put in the work. Mm-hmm. And that means you're either going to have to sacrifice your sleep, family time, which sometimes might be both. Yeah. But some people will value sleep so much that you're not going to make it. That's just the truth. And then you better get out of the routine of I'm working 5 days a week, right? If you work a traditional job and you want to open up a business and you devoted 8 hours a day to that employment, and you're not getting off, investing hours into yourself, then you're failing, right? If you take that day off, that extra day off that you said you're going to get, and do nothing, you counted that as a 0 day, then you failed yourself.
That's right.
You're not going to get to that level. You're not, what I would say is you're not ready, nor are you fit for it, and you shouldn't have it because you're not willing to put in the work. It takes sacrifice to get where we're at.
And that's the sad thing is that this culture today is, so when I work with businesses, the first thing we talk about is, okay, it's business 101. When you hire your first employee, what's the least amount of money I can pay the employee to get the most amount of work out of them? And the employee is like, what's the most I can get out of the employer and work the least amount? So it's two fleas wanting to suck from something and there's no dog, right? They're like, you're already selfish. And that selfishness doesn't create value, and we can go into so much more with that. However, when you look at Jewish culture, they're the hardest working people next to Mexican Americans, business owners in the world, basically, right? They work so hard on their own businesses. And I do believe that culture today, I'm not talking about like my dad to this day, he's my hero. And I say this all the time. And I wrote the op-ed that came out in AM Greatness about how a lot will turn into immigrants here. This will be a good transition there, where a lot of immigrants come to the United States specifically to work the American life and dream. And they outwork us. And it's those people that outwork people that will succeed, that will find the American dream. And then you have people who are born here that are by entitlement because they were born here, they have access to all the stuff, that don't take advantage of it. And I have a friend, a woman that was part of Women in Leadership, and she came from Thailand at the age of 11, didn't speak a lick of English, taught herself English, made it. She was determined to speak without an accent because she wanted to fit in so badly. And today owns a business that generates $500,000. And she has employees that were born here, that are lazy, that are Americanized, if you will, that want to work for little and get paid a lot. And she's like, I don't understand. And so I look at people and I say, if people can come to this country and outwork you and become successful business owners, what is your excuse?
I tell people all the time, you will not outwork.
I love that.
You will not outwork.
I love it.
One of us is going to want sleep, and it's going to be you.
Man, that's superhuman.
I tell you, but I thank the military for that. In the military, we got to go through a thing, deprivation training.
Yes.
Sleep deprivation. And it's where you function on about 4 hours of sleep, 48 hours. And you learn a lot about yourself during that.
Yes.
And I've carried it over to here. And not saying that I don't value sleep, because what I've discovered is I have to get my 6 hours of sleep, 5 to 6 hours of sleep.
And you thrive.
It's my range.
That's your range, yeah.
And I'm good.
Yeah.
Now, like last week, I did, I put about almost 4 hours of sleep in on one day. And I was fine. I mean, I still functioned at a high level. I did everything the next day. I wasn't tired or dragging. But I knew in my mind, I carried it that whole day. I was like, man, I only got 4 hours of sleep. It was bothering me that I didn't get that optimal time I felt like my brain function could thrive more, and I neglected myself.
Yeah.
Because, I was just up. I just couldn't sleep, really, is what it is. But, but learning yourself to be able to say, okay, I need to be asleep, not in bed. I need to be asleep by this time, and I need to be up at this time. Yeah. And then what are your daily routines?
My husband and I have that I would say disagreement, because like, you don't sleep enough. And I'm like, I thrive off 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep. I literally thrive off of it. I feel when I get 8 hours or more, I feel like I'm tired all day. Like if I oversleep, I don't function. Now I can function, and I don't recommend this, right? I can function on 4 hours, 2-3 days a week. But at that point, you do start getting sick. That's where stress and anxiety, and that's not me. That's the stuff that's been studied in labs. And we operate off supernatural,
That's right.
Spiritual anointing. We're going to tap into the Creator. But what happens is if we carry that too much and it becomes a habit, then we don't create discipline in our life.
That's right.
Right. So the disciplined time to go to sleep, the disciplined time to wake up, the disciplined plan of action and way that creates success. And I wasn't always that woman. Let's just be honest. Like those people who knew Crystal Sarmiento, who was Crystal de Leon Calvillo back in 1999, will tell you she's a different woman. And thank God for that.
Yeah.
Or like Joyce Meyer says, thank God I'm not where I need to be, but thank God I'm not where I used to be.
That's right.
Right. I am a different woman. And I attribute it to really the 14 to 16 years serving the ministries, being involved for 20 plus years working in corporations, but also leaving work in a high powered, stressful business development career, pick up my girls, run around Houston, drive to church, serve, come back home, cook dinner late, 8, 9, 10, go to bed, wake up again at 6, do the Houston shuffle, right? Driving them to school with 45-minute drive there, dropping them off, going to serve, the masters then, which were corporations, and then go pick them up. I mean, it was chaotic, but I served so much, and I sat myself in church. And when I was driving around Houston, Texas, all over Houston for business, I was constantly being fed by the word. So when my friends were out partying and living, the club life, I was doing self-development, but it was more of kingdom development. It was identity development. It was investing in who the woman you see today is. That didn't happen overnight. That happened with sacrificing, serving in church, serving my family, working hard in corporate America, and just being head down, thinking that what was going to get me ahead was, and ultimately it did, but working very, very hard and being a strong professional, but then also serving God and not losing balance.
Can't lose that balance.
Can't lose that balance. And so I think that serving God all for those years, and even to this day, right? Those are what developed the character of who I am. And those are the principles that made me the successful woman I am. So they ask me all the time, how did you do it in corporate America with all the men? I was like, well, first of all, I didn't realize I was the only woman at the table. I never had the identity or the victim complex ever.
I sit in some meetings and stuff with people that say, do you realize you're the only Latino there? I was like, no.
Exactly.
Didn't even think about it till you brought it.
Exactly. Yeah, and even in my campaign, and let's be clear.
We're going to talk about that here in a minute.
We will. We'll talk about that. But being in corporate America, part of the success that I was able to achieve, and people that I worked with countless amount of personalities and teams and professionals and executives, and then the client on the client side. And one of the things that they would always say is, how are you always so happy? And they didn't even know that I was going home to stress and chaos and anxiety in the life that I lived before with my ex-husband, which was not a good environment. But it was the joy of the Lord. And they would laugh at me, and I'm like, no, literally. Literally, that is what got me to the place that I was. That's what got me to engage and care about humans, to care about what did they really need. It taught me to be an active listener. It taught me to really care beyond the corporate development and the sales and all of those things. It taught me to connect to people, and it taught me work ethic. It taught me everything that I carry with me today. So now I look back and I'm like, that was boot camp. It was all boot camp for what God had for me today. Oh. Right? And oftentimes I had the privilege, I would say, to sit at the table with very, very, very important executives, world-class executives. And it just never dawned on me, oh, you're the only woman here. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, that's why that happened. Oh, that's why they picked so-and-so. But I never walked out of any situation, well, it's because I'm a woman. It's because I'm a Latina. Let's just be honest. I technically don't look like a Latina, okay? So, okay, I may not look like one, but I am a Latina, right? I'm a Mexican-American. There is a difference. First generation. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I believe that the victim mentality that our culture, that social media is impressing upon people's minds, is giving them a chip on their shoulder and telling them that they're victims. Yeah. And it's giving them this energy of, well, it's because I'm this, it's because I'm that. The most successful people in the world do not look at their victimhood to make them successful, ever. And I didn't realize that. But I look back and I thought, I was doing some analysis, thinking to my husband and I were talking, I'm like, I wonder why. I just look at men in the eye. And oftentimes they were intimidated. They would come back and say, you really intimidated that guy. I'm like, really? Why? I'm just being myself. But it comes back to being raised by a very alpha, strong male who had every reason to come home and cry and whine about his circumstances and not get up and go and push a lawnmower when it was 30 degrees or raining or 110 degrees in the summer. Every day of Houston weather, get up and go push a lawnmower and come home and never complain and never look me in the eye and say, well, baby girl, I can't buy you those Jordans because we're poor. Never said that. Never said, It's because, baby, she has a mom that lives in her home. You don't. My dad never impressed on me. Why? Because he, like many Mexican Americans that come to the United States of America, come with a sense of dignity already and a sense of pride. They don't come as victims. Many of them.
No. Hard work.
Hard workers, especially in the 70s and the 80s. They came here. My dad not once asked for welfare.
You know, it's funny. Before this episode, I interviewed a man who was a Mexican immigrant. And he had said he's never been on welfare. He came here, started on a weed eater, and he retired as a superintendent.
There you go.
He said he never took a handout,
Ever.
just knew to come work. And they asked him if he was on the weed eater, and they had asked him if he knew how to drive a tractor because the grass needed to get mowed. And he said yes. And he jumped on the tractor, started cutting grass, and then next thing you know, he got promoted, and then he was getting promoted to another thing.
And you know what? That man, I don't even know who that is, but I'll tell you what, just from hearing that, that tells you he didn't have a victim mentality. He was ready to work, came with a sense of dignity and a sense of pride. I earned it. Now, in the kingdom, we believe God can do supernatural over and above in the spiritual to open doors for us to access things, right, for his purpose and glory. However, when we're talking about immigrants coming to the United States, there's a fallacy that many of them need to be on welfare and that they're less than. That is an offense. That is an offense to people like my dad who looked us in the eye and said, we do not complain, we go to work. And your word is your word, and you outwork people and you don't complain.
Outwork them.
You outwork them. And that's it. But nowadays, you hear people say, oh, it's too stressful to drive. What happened to the grit? What happened to I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen? I don't need a handout. No, thank you. I don't want your loan. Jesus is my sugar daddy. You know, those type of mentality. And so I believe that it is that, it really just boils down to that. Was my dad a perfect dad? No, he wasn't. But it didn't matter because the type of father that he was a man who protected me, a man who taught me to love Jesus Christ, raised me Catholic, regardless of what people say, it doesn't matter. It taught me the practice of prayer. It taught me to love Jesus, and it taught me what authority was. My dad was an authority in my life, and that's why I don't have a problem with men in my, especially strong ones, right? He looked me in the eye, me and my brother, and told us, don't talk back. And if we did, we knew we were going to get slapped. Oh, is that abusive? Maybe not. But it made us, the women, exactly. You hit me when I was 5. You deserved it. Trust me.
I believe what the one guy says, and and about spoil the rod. Spoil the child.
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Or if you don't discipline your child, you hate them.
That's right. And in the Bible, you see the children who acted out, those kings that were brats, and it was because their parents spoiled them.
Yeah, can't do it. Well, look, we're going to do part 2 here in a minute with me, and we're excited. So I want to thank you guys. You guys come right back and listen to part 2 of Crystal's journey. She just got elected to city council. She is moving mountains, and she's taking back territory. We'll see you here in a minute on the next episode. God bless.